Kevin Costner stands as one of the final, unbreakable pillars of American cinema, the man who transformed the into a field into a sacred memory for an entire generation, and dared to redefine Hollywood through the soul and courage of Dances with Wolves. Long before the world recognized him as a legend, Kevin Costner emerged from a modest beginning in the dusty town of Linwood, without connections, without privilege, armed only with steely resolve, unwavering determination, and a devotion that never bent or broke. He is not merely a star, he is a sculptor of emotion, a man who turns silence into thunder, loneliness into depth, and fragile hope into films that live forever. Yet behind that steady voice and composed gaze lies a life repeatedly torn apart. Broken marriages, homes slowly emptied, relentless legal battles, and wounds that fame never had the power to shield or heal. And now at 70, a new storm is quietly gathering. Without noise, without warning, yet powerful enough to force Kevin Costner to confront the most painful chapter of his own story. If Kevin Costner has ever touched your heart through a role, a single look, or a quiet strength, we invite you to help carry that memory forward. As a tribute to an icon who endured pain in silence, paid the price of greatness, and still burns as one of Hollywood's last living flames. Every legend is born from a wound, and some wounds are so silent that they shape a soul before it ever learns how to speak. Kevin Michael Costner was born on January 18, 1955, in the sun-baked, working-class sprawl of Linwood, California, not as a promise of greatness, but as a fragile notion of survival itself. The youngest son of William Bill Costner, a man hardened by demanding technical labor and relentless hours, and Sharon Ray Costner, a social welfare worker who spent her life confronting poverty and broken lives. Returning home each night, carrying burdens she rarely allowed herself to release. His father's hands were rough and scarred, endlessly repairing what the world kept breaking, while his mother's kindness was quieter, revealed through weary smiles, soft hymns, and meals cooked on a stove, always close to losing its flame. Love in the Costner household was never loud or indulgent, but it was unyielding, forged by necessity rather than comfort, and Kevin felt it not through words, but by watching his parents endure when there was nothing left to give. Yet even before his first breath, grief had already claimed a permanent place at the family table. Because in 1953, 2 years earlier, his brother Mark Douglas Costner lived for only a single day before slipping away, leaving behind a silence so heavy it reshaped every form of love that followed. That loss hardened Bill into vigilance and folded Sharon into quiet sorrow, and Kevin grew up sensing an absence he could never name, learning early that the deepest pain does not announce itself, it simply stays. In that house of unspoken grief, he learned his first brutal truth about life. Some children do not grow up missing what they lost, but learning how to live around an emptiness that never leaves. Instability became Kevin Costner's first teacher, and goodbye a language he learned before belonging ever arrived. By the time he was 12, his childhood had already been scattered across Compton, Ventura, Visalia, and Orange County, each move chasing steadier work and ending in another quiet rupture. Cardboard boxes, torn packing tape, and unfamiliar school hallways marked the rhythm of his youth, and with every relocation he learned to turn inward, carrying his world privately so it could not be taken from him again. He was not the loud boy or the celebrated athlete, but the observer at the back of the classroom, the child who wrote poems instead of raising his hand and learned how to disappear without being noticed. Kevin would later remember how starting over became a reflex, how he learned to detach before attachment could wound him, and how nights in the back seat of a car, watching streetlights blur into something unrecognizable, taught him to say farewell without tears. That constant uprooting carved a quiet endurance into his character, because when nothing is permanent, survival is built in unseen places, and Kevin built his strength there, piece by piece through loneliness, restraint, and the resolve to create something that could never be packed away. Adolescence did not erase the pain, but it finally gave that pain a voice. In 1973, when Kevin graduated from Villa Park High School, The quiet boy shaped by nameless absences had risen to 6 feet 1 inch, having learned how to endure without demanding attention. Real growth happened far from mirrors and measurements, in church choirs where his voice trembled before it held, and in sleepless nights where poetry gave shape to feelings he had never been taught how to name. His father's discipline became an inner compass, his mother's faith a refuge, and Kevin began to understand that starting over was not just something life kept doing to him, but something it was training him to survive. Those subtle, cumulative wounds of childhood, never loud, never dramatic, became the unseen source of the depth audiences would later feel in his work, proof that greatness often rises from the quietest, most overlooked places, where simply enduring is the first and hardest victory. Those early years did not teach Kevin Costner how to dream loudly. They taught him how to survive in silence. By the time childhood finally loosened its grip, uncertainty no longer felt threatening. It felt familiar, something he had learned to live with rather than escape. Beneath that hard-earned discipline stirred a quiet unrest, the fear that a life spent only enduring might slowly erase him from the inside, long before anyone noticed he was gone. In 1978, he graduated from California State University Fullerton with a Bachelor of Arts degree, outwardly prepared for a stable future he was never convinced he could live with. At CSUF, he did what was expected, showed up, followed the rules, and tried to believe that structure could silence the restlessness within him. Yet in his final year, something he had long suppressed began to surface. Acting and dance interests he had barely dared to name started pulling at him with quiet persistence, as if the parts of him shaped by observation and restraint had finally found a voice. He hesitated, weighed the risks, and questioned whether choosing art would cost him the security he had been taught to protect at all costs. That doubt followed him onto a plane in 1978, returning from his honeymoon in Puerto Vallarta when he found himself seated beside Richard Burton. Anxious and exposed, Kevin confessed what he had long buried, that he wanted to act, but feared what it might cost the life he was trying to protect. Burton listened without interruption, then answered quietly, "It was possible, and the price did not have to destroy everything he loved." The exchange lasted only minutes, yet it stayed with Kevin for years. He later said Burton offered more than encouragement. He gave him permission to try without feeling he was betraying the man he had been raised to become. Clinging to the responsible path laid out for him, Kevin accepted a marketing manager position, hoping discipline might silence the unrest. It didn't. It sharpened it. With his wife's steady support, he began attending acting classes 5 nights a week, balancing exhaustion with fragile hope. The job lasted just 30 days, long enough for him to understand that ignoring his calling would cost him more than failure ever could. To pay for classes, he took whatever work kept him moving, scrubbing fishing boats and guiding tourists past the homes of movie stars he could only imagine becoming. It was no longer ambition that drove him forward, but a resolve forged long before, the refusal to spend his life merely enduring. Silence followed his decision faster than doubt ever could. Within weeks, Kevin Costner stood alone with a single suitcase, a secondhand jacket, and a battered Datsun aimed at Los Angeles, carrying barely enough money to reach it. No applause waited, only dust, distance, and the brutal truth that choosing a dream meant surrendering comfort. Hunger lingered, cold settled into his bones, and nights filled with quiet desperation. He worked until his hands split, slept fully clothed when the heat failed, and whispered, "Just one more day," as if survival had to be renewed each morning. Pride kept him from calling home. Days blurred into rejection and exhaustion, measured in worn shoes and sweat-soaked headshots left at casting doors that never opened. On rainy nights, he sat outside studio gates, watching laughter spill into the light while he remained unseen in the dark. Los Angeles had promised dreams, but it gave him silence instead. And within that silence, something hardened. He would not go home defeated. Then came a chance so small it almost felt like an insult. A cheap beach movie needed bodies, not talent, no pay, no guarantees, just a camera. Kevin showed up barefoot and sunburned, nodding when told they only needed someone willing to work. Sizzle Beach USA, 1981, became his first screen credit and nearly broke him when it resurfaced years later, awkward and humiliating. In 1982, he appeared briefly in Ron Howard's Night Shift, standing at the edge of Hollywood, yet still forgotten. His first leading role followed in Stacy's Nights, 1983, proving he could carry a film, but not enough to be seen. That same year, he believed his breakthrough had arrived with The Big Chill, filming scenes as Alex, the friend whose suicide binds the story together, only to watch every moment cut from the final film. He sat through the premiere erased, invisible, his faith hanging by a thread. Still, he refused to surrender. "Dreams don't open doors," he would later say. "They just give you the strength to keep knocking." And in 1985, when Lawrence Kasdan, the very director who had once cut him, called him back for Silverado, Kevin Costner finally stepped into the light, not as a lucky newcomer, but as a survivor whose endurance had earned its moment. The applause that followed was not for fortune, it was for survival. Glory doesn't come gently when it's built on hunger, doubt, and years of silence. It arrives violently, bright, sudden, impossible to ignore. Kevin Costner didn't drift into Hollywood in the mid-1980s. He detonated, carrying the weight of every unseen year he had survived. The man who once scrubbed fishing boats, drove trucks, and counted gas bills suddenly stood at the center of the American imagination, even as he struggled to believe he belonged there. He later admitted that success felt unreal, borrowed rather than owned, because for so long he had trained himself only to endure, never to expect praise. In 1987, the Untouchables turned him into an emblem of American virtue, quiet courage, moral gravity, a man standing firm inside chaos. The film earned over $100 million worldwide, but what mattered more to Kevin was the respect that followed. For the first time, he wasn't fighting to be noticed. He was fighting the fear of losing it all. With Bull Durham in 1988 and Field of Dreams in 1989, his bond with audiences grew intimate, almost confessional. When he whispers, "If you build it, he will come." Alone in a cornfield, it feels less like a line and more like a promise. To anyone who has built their dream in silence, waiting to know they were never alone. When Kevin Costner turned 35, success stopped feeling like a destination and became a trap. Acting alone was no longer enough. He feared becoming safe, predictable, replaceable. So he gambled everything. Mortgaging his own money, he founded TIG Productions and staked his future on Dances with Wolves, a 3-hour Western built on silence, partly in Lakota, dismissed by Hollywood as career suicide. Studios begged him to shorten it, explain more, erase the quiet. Kevin refused. "Silence is where truth reside," he later said, because silence had shaped him long before fame arrived. The $22 million budget ballooned. Storms destroyed sets. Actors walked away mid-shoot. Nights ended with him alone in a freezing trailer, staring at the ceiling, asking whether he had traded his family, his reputation, his future for a film no one wanted. Doubt never left, only exhaustion muted it. When the film premiered, it didn't merely succeed, it detonated expectations. Dances with Wolves earned $424 million worldwide, won 7 Academy Awards including Best Picture and Best Director, and lifted him into Hollywood's highest tier. Yet as applause thundered, he stood still and admitted quietly, "I didn't trust myself." Triumph felt eerily familiar, deafening outside, silent within, echoing the solitude he had carried long before the world learned his name. Success carried its own cruelty. The early 1990s collapsed into a blur of triumph and exhaustion. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, 1991, earned $390 million, even as critics mocked his accent, and Kevin learned that applause can feel like a cage. That same year, JFK placed him in political crosshairs, headlines calling him dangerous and irresponsible, but he refused to retreat. "Any discussion of what could be true," he said, "can only make us freer." Then came The Bodyguard, 1992, a gamble of instinct over safety. He waited a year for Whitney Houston, rejected a $10 million upfront salary, and chose profit participation. The risk exploded, $411 million worldwide, over 50 million soundtracks sold, more than $20 million earned personally. By 1993, he commanded $10 million per film, A surreal peak for a man who once slept beside a cold radiator, whispering himself to sleep. But the cost was merciless. Friends remembered sleepless nights, directing by day, editing by night, his body running on will alone. Success can be lonelier than failure, he admitted, and then came the fall. Waterworld 1995 nearly erased him. Hurricanes wrecked sets, the budget surged to $235 million, and he was once strapped to a mast in a storm, nearly dragged into the sea. Alone, soaked, shaking, he believed his career was finished. When the film flopped and critics turned vicious, the verdict felt final. The Postman, 1997, followed like an echo. Losses, savage reviews, a barrage of Razzies that publicly dismantled what had been celebrated. Studios stopped calling. Hollywood looked away. He grew quieter, thinner, withdrawn, a return to the solitude he knew before fame. And yet he did not vanish. He chose smaller films, lighter stories, westerns others had abandoned, and remembered what he had learned long before success arrived: how to begin again without applause. "I've never been afraid to start over," he said, not defiantly but truthfully, because Kevin Costner never chased noise. He chased truth, and truth, forged through silence, perseverance, and loss, does not disappear when the crowd turns its back. There is a silence that arrives only after the noise has faded, and Kevin Costner knew it well. The storms of success had passed, yet what remained was not peace but a hollow stillness in rooms once filled with admiration. He did not need headlines to know the tide had turned. He felt it in unanswered calls, in Hollywood's gaze already drifting toward faces younger and easier to replace. Mornings found him staring at a dark phone screen, as if the world had quietly switched him off. Once celebrated, now quietly dismissed, he absorbed the indifference without protest. "I wasn't broken," he would later admit. "I was empty, and emptiness forces you to face what matters." His body carried the ache of years spent chasing ambition. His spirit carried doubt. Still, he refused to stand still. In Aspen, surrounded by snow and cold, he walked alone, boots cutting into fresh drifts, no longer asking why the world had moved on, but why its approval had ever mattered. Watching the snow erase his footprints, he felt bitterness fail to arrive. Clarity did. He began creating again, not to be seen, but to remember why art had once saved him. From that solitude came Open Range in 2003, a modest Western made with restraint rather than spectacle. It earned $68 million on a $26 million budget, but its real return was quieter. It gave him back his voice. "Truth doesn't rush," he said. "It waits." Time eventually answered him. In 2018, Yellowstone arrived, and the silence he had endured broke open. At 63, Costner became John Dutton, not a hero, but a man weathered by responsibility, fighting for what cannot be replaced. "I don't play heroes," he said. "I play men who try." America recognized itself in that effort. The series became cable's most-watched drama, reaching 16 million viewers. And by season 5, he earned $1.3 million per episode, not as reward but as reckoning. Yet numbers never defined him. He still arrived before dawn, boots in the dirt, rewriting lines between takes, insisting truth must be lived. Beyond the cameras, another dream refused to die. Horizon, an American saga conceived in 1988, had been dismissed for decades as too long, too quiet, too costly. Costner moved forward anyway, mortgaging his home and investing $38 million of his own money. "If it fails," he said, "it fails with my name on it." In the Utah desert, wind cutting through his coat, exhaustion etched into his face, he urged the cameras to keep rolling. When the first chapter premiered at Cannes in 2024, critics divided and the box office returned only $38.7 million, less than he had spent. But standing alone at the back of the theater as the final frame faded, Kevin Costner was not measuring success or failure. He was measuring faith. Now 70, he no longer waits to be crowned. He has turned loss into legacy, silence into purpose, and work into devotion, learning at last that fame teaches you how to rise, but only failure teaches you how to remain. There was a time when Kevin Costner believed loneliness had finally fallen behind him, when the outside world seemed smaller than the quiet happiness growing inside his heart. That chapter began in 1975 at California State University, Fullerton, when 20-year-old Kevin met Cindy Silva, a young actress filled with hope and belief. Their bond formed naturally on campus, grounded in the rare comfort of being truly understood. In 1978, they married with borrowed rings and the reckless faith of youth, convinced that love alone would be enough. Those early years were radiant. Cindy stood beside him before the cameras, before the crowds, before Hollywood even knew his name. Together, they built a life from almost nothing, secondhand furniture and apartments still scented with fresh paint. When their children arrived, Annie in 1984, Lily in 1986, and Joe in 1988, the small house filled with cries, lullabies, and simple family outings beneath the California sun. For a brief golden stretch, fame had not yet intruded, and that family felt unshakable. Quietly, Cindy folded magazines into a drawer, delaying the day the man she loved might belong to a world beyond her reach. Cindy believed in me before the world did, Kevin would later say. She made me believe in myself. That was the peak, and only later would he understand that even the fullest happiness cannot shield a life from what waits ahead. Then the storm struck with a ferocity no one expected. Success did not knock politely. It tore through the door. Films stacked up, awards followed, and Kevin became a man who no longer returned home, only passed through. The house remained full, but the heart of it, the laughter, the shared moments, the quiet communion, vanished. Cindy raised 3 children in Ventura, while her husband lived in airports and hotel rooms, speaking to them only through tired, rushed phone calls. The children learned which chair would remain empty before the table was even set. Birthdays blurred into holidays, holidays blurred into departures. In 1991, while Kevin stood under the blinding lights of the Oscars, bearing the adoration of millions, Cindy sat in silence at home, 3 children asleep, watching a husband who seemed farther away than ever. They fought what was happening, counseling, pauses in filming, quiet retreats meant to remember who they used to be. But distance had already taken root. Trust did not shatter in an instant. It thinned like fragile paper left in the sun. Rumors whispered through Hollywood corridors, unconfirmed yet corrosive. Cindy learned to measure her words carefully to keep herself from breaking. Kevin learned, too late, that success can steal more than it ever gives. I didn't lose my family in one moment, he admitted years later. I lost them by being absent too often, too long. When it ended in 1994, after 16 years together, it ended quietly without spectacle, only with the deep, resonant damage of what had been lost. They filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, words too small for the wreckage they covered. The settlement stunned the public. Nearly $80 million, one of the costliest divorces of the era, reached without a prenuptial agreement, resting solely on a trust that had once felt unbreakable. Cindy received the family home and primary custody of the children. Kevin kept his production company and the unbearable truth that no sum of money could restore the time he had lost. He later admitted that the hardest realization was knowing he would now see his children only half as much, his voice breaking under the weight of that truth. That night did not feel like separation. It felt like a quiet funeral for a life that would never gather all under one roof again. Years later, Kevin would return alone to that old house, its paint cracked, the room strange and unfamiliar, and finally grasp the lesson no award could teach. Love does not end because it fails. It ends when it is postponed too long. He and Cindy chose dignity in the aftermath, co-parenting without bitterness, standing together at graduations, bound forever by 3 children who carried both their faces, their hearts, their legacy. Their marriage did not survive fame, but it left behind something enduring, a truth carved from the hardest lessons life could offer. Success is hollow if it costs your children a home, a haven, a family whole, because the cruelest price is not the money you lose, but the bedtime stories you'll never get to read under the same roof again. After one marriage unraveled, Kevin Costner carried the quiet fear that love always demands more than it promises. So when he met Christine Baumgartner in 1998, it arrived without fire. Only the fragile dignity of a second beginning. She was 20 years younger, a model and handbag designer with a calm steadiness that grounded the restless force that had driven him for decades. They separated in 2002 when she wanted children, and he feared beginning again. But time, patient and insistent, brought her back. "I couldn't lose her over that," he would later say. Their wedding on September 25, 2004, at his Dunbar Ranch in Aspen, was not spectacle, but salvation. The wedding unfolded simply, almost quietly. There was no need for spectacle, only presence. Kevin stood beneath the aspen sky and understood that this was not a beginning, but a mercy. "I thought I had used up my chances," he said softly. What neither of them saw was the moment when surviving turned into believing, and believing into assumption. By the time doubt finally loosened its grip, the years had already reshaped everything without ceremony. What Kevin and Christine shared no longer felt fragile or temporary. It felt inhabited, settled into place, mistaken for permanence. Then the children arrived. Caden Wyatt in 2007, Hayes Logan in 2009, and Grace Avery in 2010 did more than grow their family. They rooted it. Even the land seemed to yield. The ranch absorbed their lives, filling with routine and rhythm, becoming less a refuge from the world than a place the world revolved around. Time slowed without asking permission. Mornings opened with voices crossing open space. Evenings closed beneath a kitchen light left on because someone was always expected home. The house filled not with spectacle, but with repetition. Shared meals, familiar footsteps, the quiet certainty of who would still be there tomorrow. In that constancy, Kevin recognized what had escaped him for decades. This, he admitted only to himself, was the destination. He stepped back from premieres and noise. Horizons ceased to be ambition and became an offering. Something meant to outlast him in his children's hands. For the first time, the silence that followed laughter inside his home carried more weight than any applause beyond its walls. But the cruelest endings never announce themselves. They hollow a home from the inside. Work reclaimed the space love once guarded. Yellowstone kept him away for months. Horizon devoured time, money, and the fragile calm they had built. Christine held the household together alone, slowly fading inside a marriage the world still admired. "He's always gone," she confided. "I miss the simple things. Coffee, breakfast, a life without schedules." Kevin believed he was still protecting what mattered, blind to the truth that presence postponed becomes presence denied. Words thinned, doors closed without sound. The house remained full, but its heart had already left. By the time either of them understood what was happening, it was no longer breaking. It was over. May 2023 marked the moment everything stopped holding together. Christine filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, and Kevin felt the weight of finality settle in. It felt, he later said, like the ground disappeared. What followed was not private grief but public dismantling. An ironclad prenuptial agreement governed the end. Christine's attorney sought $248,000 per month in child support. The court reduced it to $63,000. Figures argued in spreadsheets while hearts were ignored. Under the prenup, she was ordered to vacate the Santa Barbara home where their children had taken first steps and first swims. For Christine, leaving was not escape but fracture. Walking away from the only home her children had known, carrying the quiet guilt of choosing separation over a marriage that could no longer hold them. Neighbors said the day she left, the curtains fluttered like wings. Kevin came home that night to a kitchen light left burning, the rooms carrying the faint scent of perfume and ocean air, and realized that silence has a smell. Then came the photographs. Christine walking the coastline beside Josh Connor, a man Kevin had once trusted, once welcomed into his home. Proof of nothing, pain of everything. "I didn't want this," he told friends quietly. "I still love her, but some things you can't unsee." By late 2023, the court had ruled. By early 2024, the marriage was legally over. The children learned the new geometry of love through calendars and car rides, discovering that home now existed in two places, and fully in neither. The first time, he lost half his wealth. This time, he lost the illusion that love alone could protect a family from absence. Now 70, Kevin Costner divides time instead of money, school plays, birthdays, phone calls, replacing dinners under one roof. For Kevin, the loss settled into a single, unforgiving truth. Everything he had built was still standing, except the one place where all his children could fall asleep under the same roof. He continues to co-parent, to show up without cameras, understanding at last that love does not end with signatures. It becomes duty, then memory, then grace. And when the noise finally fades, what remains is not scandal or blame, but a silence that tells the truth. There was no villain, only time, and the quiet cost of being away too long. He had built worlds that millions could escape into, yet failed to remain inside the one place that mattered most. In the end, Kevin Costner learned the lesson no success can soften. Absence does not arrive loudly, but when it finishes its work, love is already gone. Now at 70, Kevin Costner stands at a place few ever reach. Not at the summit of success, but at its quiet reckoning. Born in a modest home in Linwood, California, the son of a ditch digger and a social worker, he grew up moving from town to town, learning early that stability was temporary and survival was earned, not promised. Today, his net worth exceeds $250 million, not as a trophy of excess, but as evidence of survival. What he owns now is almost mythic in scale. Dunbar Ranch in Aspen, Colorado, a 160-acre sanctuary valued near $250 million, carved from mountains and solitude. It holds 3 distinct residences: a sun-drenched main lodge of timber and glass, a lakeside house built for reflection, and a river house where water moves like a steady pulse. There is a private baseball field, skating rink, miles of forest trails, and winter nights where firelight turns snow into gold. For a man who once slept beside moving boxes, owning land that feels like America itself is not indulgence. It is proof that what once tried to uproot him never did. Further west, overlooking the Pacific, stands his Flint Ridge estate in Santa Barbara, a Tuscan-inspired compound valued at nearly $60 million. Terracotta arches frame ocean light. Courtyards breathe lavender and salt air. Inside are Italian frescoes, Murano glass chandeliers, a private cinema, stone terraces, and a 1,000-bottle wine cellar, each vintage marking a year endured rather than celebrated. His possessions extend beyond property: a 1968 Shelby GT 350h that hums with rebellion, a weathered Land Rover Defender, a Toyota Tundra that still hauls ranch work, an Audi S8 for quiet dawn drives along Highway 1, a classic Harley Davidson for chasing silence, and a vintage wooden boat he pilots alone when the sea feels kinder than the world. Yet friends say none of it owns him. Money isn't success, Costner once reflected. It's a tool, and tools are meant to build. After everything that rose and everything that fell, Kevin Costner's life has finally grown quiet. Not empty, but earned. There is no new romance, no hunger for headlines. Only a man who wakes before dawn, writes, directs, and finishes what he begins. His passion project, Horizon, an American saga, cost him tens of millions of his own fortune, not for glory, but for truth. A story built with time, loss, and blood. "I don't need statues," he has said. "My legacy is the life I lived." That life now revolves around his children, who visit between Aspen and Santa Barbara, filling screening rooms with laughter and ranch trails with footsteps. Old home movies flicker across walls. Birthdays, Christmas mornings. Faces younger but joy unchanged. Moments reminding him that presence, not perfection, is what lasts. Away from the spotlight, he has quietly directed millions toward causes that mirror his own battles. Funding Parkinson's research, children's hospitals, women's shelters, and long-term support for first responders. He has hosted private charity gatherings at Dunbar Ranch itself, turning his sanctuary into a lifeline for those who have none, believing that wealth only matters when it eases someone else's burden. He lives with pain, the ache of old injuries, sleepless decades, the shadows of loss. but the fire remains. At 70, he protects his body the way he protects his work, with discipline. Long walks through aspen trails, horseback riding, stretching routines, and early mornings have replaced the recklessness of youth as he listens to pain now instead of challenging it. Kevin Costner is no longer chasing immortality. He is honoring endurance. His story is not about winning every battle, but about standing after each one. From a boy who believed stories could change the world, to a man who learned they must first be lived honestly, he has become something rarer than a star, a testament. If this journey stayed with you, leave a quiet tribute below, or simply a word of thanks for a man who kept standing when it would have been easier to fade away. Because in the end, a life is not made rich by what we manage to keep, but by what we endure, what we give, and the parts of ourselves we choose not to abandon.